The cold was not merely a sensation. It was an entity. It was a living, breathing void that first gnawed at my fingertips, then stole the feeling from my toes, and finally, with a cruel, patient insistence, it reached into my core and stilled my very heart. My final memory was not of pain, but of a profound, aching loneliness, underscored by the faint, mocking glow of a fireplace through a frost-rimed window. I died once. It was the winter of 1982. I, Dr. Anya Petrova, froze to death on the desolate steps outside Major Dimitri Volkov's quarters while he was inside, his arms wrapped around Ilara Vance, a lithe and beautiful dancer from the visiting cultural performance troupe. The image of them, silhouetted against the warm hearth, was seared behind my eyelids. I had knocked until my knuckles were raw and bloody, my voice a ragged whisper swallowed by the howling wind for 3 hours. They had heard me. I knew they had. They chose to pretend they did not. Then I opened my eyes. I was gasping not from cold but from a disorientation so profound it felt like falling. The air was warm, smelling faintly of antiseptic and old paper. Sunlight, weak but present, streamed through a window onto a familiar, albeit older medical ledger open on my desk. My hands, which moments ago had been blue and numb, were warm and tingling with life. I clutched them together, feeling the steady, strong pulse at my wrist. A rhythm that had, in another reality, ceased entirely. I was in my small office at the Krasnograd Military Hospital. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of resurrected life. I looked wildly around, my eyes landing on the wall calendar. November 12, 1981. I had been thrown back over a year. The memory of my death was not a dream. It was a fresh, searing brand on my soul, a visceral truth that left me trembling. The ghost of the frostbite still prickled on my skin. I stood on unsteady legs, leaning on the desk for support. The details of the office, once mundane, now seemed incredibly vivid. The grain of the wood, the faint smell of my own lavender soap, the weight of my lab coat, each sensation was a miracle. I had been given a second chance. A fierce, cold resolve began to crystallize within me, melting away the last vestiges of panic. Dimitri Volkov and Ilara Vance would not get away with it. This time the outcome would be different. The day proceeded with a surreal normality. I performed my rounds, diagnosed a sprained ankle for a young private, and signed off on supply requisitions. My hands were steady, my voice professional, but beneath the calm exterior, my mind was a storm of calculation. I knew what was coming. I remembered this afternoon with the painful clarity of a remembered nightmare. Right on schedule, my colleague Dr. Nikolai Kolya Ivanov appeared in my doorway. He was a kind man, perhaps a little too fond of gossip, with a boyish face that often broke into an easy grin. Today, however, his expression was tinged with a hesitant excitement. "Anya," he said, leaning against the doorframe with a conspiratorial air. "You'll never guess. Major Volkov came by the hospital yesterday." I kept my face a placid mask, though my heart gave a painful, familiar lurch. "Did he?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. Kolya nodded, stepping fully into the room. "He did. And he took that herbal tonic you asked me to set aside for him. The one for his stomach." A storm began to rise in my heart, a tempest of past betrayal and present fury, but I forced it down. In my previous life, this news had been a beacon of foolish hope. I had been elated, interpreting it as a long-awaited olive branch, a sign that Dimitri was finally accepting my care, my love. But Kolya's expression had been hesitant then too, a detail I'd blindly ignored in my desperation. "Actually," Kolya added, his voice dropping as if sharing a great secret, "I saw him later near the performance troupe's rehearsal hall. He was delivering it. Looked like it was for that new dancer Ilara Vance. Heard him say his stomach's been bothering him lately, but it seemed like like a pretext." He shrugged, a little awkwardly. "Just thought you should know." The medical ledger I was holding slipped from my suddenly nerveless fingers and clattered to the floor. The sound echoed in the silent room. In my past life, this revelation had been the spark that ignited my humiliation. I had charged over to the troops' barracks in a blind, jealous rage, my emotions raw and unchecked. I had demanded answers, screamed accusations, and made a spectacular scene that only served to paint me as an unstable, hysterical wife. Ilara, with her wide, innocent eyes and perfectly timed tears, had played the victim flawlessly. Dimitri's irritation had curdled into contempt. I was the one who was thrown out, the one whose reputation was shredded. This time I did not rage. I did not cry. I bent down slowly and deliberately and picked up the ledger. I placed it neatly back on my desk. Then I smiled. It was a cold, calculated gesture that didn't reach my eyes. "Kolya," I said, my voice smooth as glass, "could you do me one more favor?" He blinked, surprised by my calm reaction. "Of course, Anya. Anything." I opened a lower drawer of my desk and pulled out a brand new, pristine thermal flask. "This is a fresh batch of tonic I just prepared this morning. Could you take it to the troop and tell them it's specially made for the major? Emphasize that it's specially prepared." Kolya frowned, taking the flask. "Isn't this the same as yesterday's? The one he already gave away?" "It's different," I said, my voice laced with a meaning he couldn't possibly decipher. "This one has something special added." That special ingredient was a concentrated extract of bitter apricot kernels. My medical knowledge, vast and detailed, was my greatest weapon. In small, controlled doses, the extract soothes the lungs and relieves coughing. But taken on an empty stomach in the amount I had prepared, it would cause violent, debilitating, and profoundly humiliating vomiting and diarrhea for a full day. It was not lethal. It was not even dangerous with proper hydration. It was simply a brutal, undeniable, and public lesson in consequences. Kolya, oblivious, nodded. "Consider it done." He turned to leave, then paused. "You're taking this all very well, Anya." I met his gaze, my own unwavering. Some things, Kolya, become clearer with time. As he left, I turned to look out my window, watching the first flurries of snow begin to fall. The storm was coming. But this time I was not going to be the one left out in the cold. The waiting was its own peculiar form of torture. For the next 2 hours, I immersed myself in work with a focus so intense it was almost manic. I sorted patient files, reviewed charts, and even assisted in a minor suturing procedure. My hands were steady, my mind clinically detached. Yet, every nerve ending was attuned to the atmosphere of the hospital, listening for the first ripple of disruption. It came not with a shout, but with a wave of tense, excited whispers that seemed to travel through the corridors like an electric current. Nurses paused their rounds to murmur to each other. Orderlies glanced up from their tasks, their expressions alight with gossip. The news spread through the sterile halls of the Krasnograd Military Hospital with the speed of a virus. A medical emergency at the Cultural Performance Troup's rehearsal hall. The details as they trickled in were deliciously scandalous. Ilara Vance, the beautiful new star dancer, had suddenly and dramatically doubled over in the middle of a routine, clutching her stomach in agony. Before anyone could fully comprehend what was happening, she had been violently, publicly, and humiliatingly ill right there on the polished wooden floor, in front of the entire troupe, visiting officers and support staff. The most shocking detail, the one that sent the gossip into overdrive, was the reaction of Major Dimitri Volkov. Witnesses said he abandoned all military decorum, his face ashen with a panic that seemed far too personal for a commanding officer. He had shoved aside a junior lieutenant, scooped the retching Ilara into his arms as if she were a precious damsel, and sprinted through the compound toward the medical wing, his desperation visible to everyone he passed. I was at the central nursing station, calmly sorting a new batch of prescription slips, when head nurse Valeria Ivanova pushed through the double doors. Her usually composed face was flushed with the drama of it all. "Dr. Petrova," she said, her voice a hushed yet urgent whisper. "The major just burst in here with a young woman. He's asking for you specifically." I looked up slowly, feigning mild professional curiosity. "Oh, what's the presentation?" "Violent vomiting and diarrhea," Valeria reported, her eyes wide. "She's pale as a ghost, trembling and crying incessantly. The major, he looks completely beside himself. Frantic." I nodded, my expression one of detached concern. "Prepare a treatment room with 4 fluids for hydration. I'll be right there." I took a moment to collect myself, smoothing down my lab coat. The calm I felt was not feigned. It was the deep, still certainty of a predator that has seen its trap sprung perfectly. I walked the familiar corridor to the emergency treatment wing, my footsteps measured and sure. The scene inside the treatment room was a perfect tableau of chaos and distress. Ilara lay on the gurney, a pathetic figure. Her flawless stage makeup was now a smeared, grotesque mask of black tears and pallid foundation. She was moaning weakly, one hand pressed dramatically to her forehead, the other clutching a stainless steel emesis basin. And there was Dimitri. He was pacing like a caged animal, his uniform jacket unbuttoned, his hair disheveled from running. The moment he saw me, he lunged forward, his eyes wild. "Anya. Thank God. Please, you have to help her. You have to do something." I ignored him for a moment, moving to the bedside and picking up Alara's chart. "What seems to be the problem, Major?" I asked, my tone cool and professional. He stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. "What's the problem?" "She's deathly ill. She got like this right after drinking that tonic you made." Alara chose that moment to let out a particularly pitiful whimper. She reached out and weakly grasped Dimitri's hand. "Dimitri," she whispered, her voice hoarse, "I feel awful. Everything is spinning." The use of his first name, so intimate and familiar in this setting, hung in the air between us. I finally looked up from the chart, raising a single cool eyebrow. "The tonic I made?" I repeated, as if clarifying a complex medical point. "Which batch are you referring to?" Dimitri was taken aback, thrown by my clinical detachment. The one you had Kolya bring over to the troop today. The one in the new flask." "Ah, that one," I said, flipping a page on the chart with a dismissive flick of my wrist. "That batch was prepared specifically for you, Major Volkov. It was a potent medicinal formulation designed to treat your chronic gastritis and ulcerative symptoms, based on your extensive medical history. You didn't seriously give a powerful, personalized herbal medication to a healthy young woman with no underlying gastric conditions, did you?" The silence in the room was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop. The two nurses attending to Alara's froze, their eyes wide. The whispers in the corridor outside seemed to still, as if everyone was holding their breath to hear his response. Mark's expression darkened, a flush of anger rising up his neck to replace the panic. "You did this on purpose," he accused, his voice low and venomous. I tilted my head, a picture of innocent confusion. "Did what on purpose, Major?" "I prepared medicine for my husband's diagnosed medical condition. You took that medicine and, for reasons known only to you, chose to administer it to a third party. The herbs in that tonic are extremely strong: ginger, codonopsis, astragalus, meant to warm and repair a damaged digestive system. Miss Vance here has a young, healthy, undoubtedly warm constitution. Of course, it would cause a severe adverse reaction. It's basic medicinal contraindication." Alara began to cry harder, her sobs now tinged with genuine distress at the turn the conversation was taking. "Dimitri, does Dr. Petrova have something against me?" she wailed, turning her tear-streaked face toward him. I stepped closer to the gurney looming over her. My presence was no longer that of a doctor but of something far more formidable. "Miss Vance, how many times have you and I actually met?" "Twice. 3 times at most. I am a chief physician at a military hospital. You are a performer with a cultural troupe. What possible personal grudge could I hold against you?" I let the question hang in the air for a beat before continuing, my voice dropping to an icy, carrying whisper. "But let me remind you, Major Volkov is a married man. A commanding officer. Yet here you are in a military medical facility calling him Dimitri, with such intimate familiarity. Don't you find that highly inappropriate?" The door to the treatment room burst open, saving them from having to answer. In strode Irina Zaitsev, the wife of Colonel Zaitsev, the base commander. She was my godmother, a woman of immense influence and zero tolerance for nonsense. Her entrance was like a sudden drop in barometric pressure. "No wonder the entire hospital is in an uproar," she declared, her sharp, intelligent eyes taking in the entire scene in a single sweeping glance. Her gaze landed on Dimitri, still holding Alara's hand, and her lips pursed in profound disapproval. "Major Volkov, I see you're putting on quite a display of passion. And for a dancer. Have you forgotten the dignity of your rank entirely?" The temperature in the room plummeted. Dimitri instinctively dropped Alara's hand as if it were on fire and snapped to attention, saluting sharply. "Ma'am. Please, this is a misunderstanding." Irina merely sneered, moving to stand beside me, a clear show of allegiance. "I came to check on my goddaughter. And it seems I arrived just in time to see which little vixen has the base's youngest major so thoroughly bewitched." Alara tried to sit up, her face a mask of terrified innocence. "Ma'am, you misunderstand. There's nothing between me and the major. We're just... Lie down, Irina commanded, her voice dripping with dismissive contempt. If you're this frail, perhaps you're not cut out for the rigors of the troop after all. She then turned her formidable attention back to Dimitri. Now, Major, explain. How did medicine specifically prepared for your condition by your own wife end up in her hands? She jabbed a finger toward Alara. Sweat beaded on Dimitri's forehead. He was trapped. It was a mistake, ma'am. I took the wrong one. I saw my opening and took it. I walked to the side counter and picked up the hospital's intake logbook. According to the log, I said, my voice clear and factual, when you came to the hospital yesterday, you specifically sought out Dr. Ivanov and asked if the tonic he was holding was prepared by me. You only took it after he confirmed that it was. There was no wrong one, Major. You knew exactly what it was and who it was from. A collective, silent gasp seemed to go through the room. The narrative was now undeniable. Irina Zaitsev picked up the thread without missing a beat. So, let me be certain I understand. You took medicine prepared by your wife to treat your illness, and instead of taking it yourself, you delivered it to a young, healthy dancer from the cultural troupe. She let the statement hang in the air, allowing its sheer idiocy and impropriety to sink in for everyone present. Murmurs of understanding and judgment rippled through the crowd that had gathered in the hallway. The story was no longer about a sick girl. It was about a commanding officer's profound lapse in judgment and character. Dimitri's face flushed a deep, mortified red. He was losing control of the situation completely. Anya, he pleaded, his voice strained, desperation replacing his earlier anger. Let's go home. We can discuss this there. In private. I let out a cold, hollow laugh that echoed in the silent room. Home, Major. I emphasized his rank, severing our personal connection in front of everyone. Do you even remember where that is? How many nights have you actually spent there this past month? Every time you did, you smelled of cheap perfume and stage makeup. You told me the cafeteria food was sufficient, that you didn't need my tonics. Yet you'll take what I make and hand it to another woman. Tell me, Dmitri Volkov, what exactly do you take me for? My voice wasn't loud, but every word was sharp and clear, landing with the precision of a scalpel. I was not screaming. I was not hysterical. I was stating facts, and the truth of them was reflected in the ashamed, averted eyes of the man I had once loved. I looked at Alara, at Dimitri, at the gathered staff. I had said everything I needed to say. I turned and walked out of the treatment room, my head held high. The whispers that followed me this time were not of pity or scorn, but of stunned respect. This time they had all seen the truth. And the game had only just begun. Leaving the cacophony of the emergency room behind felt like stepping out of a stifling fog into clear, cold air. The corridor, still lined with curious onlookers, parted for me. Their whispers now felt different, tinged with a new respect, a dawning understanding of the spectacle they had just witnessed. I didn't meet their eyes but kept my gaze fixed ahead, my posture erect, the picture of wounded dignity and unwavering composure. My destination was not my office. It was the house I shared with Dimitri in the officer's compound. The home I had poured 3 years of my life into, decorating, maintaining, and waiting in. The place where, in my previous life, I had wept and begged and ultimately sealed my own fate with desperation. This time I was not coming to plead. I was coming to reclaim. The winter air was biting, but after the memory of my frozen death, it felt refreshing. I walked with purpose, my boots crunching on the gravel path. The Volkov residence was a modest but well-kept duplex at the end of a row. Smoke curled from the chimney, and through the front window, I could see the figure of my mother-in-law, Galina, sitting in her favorite armchair by the fire, knitting. She looked up, her face breaking into a practiced, warm smile as I opened the door. Anya, darling. You're home early. Is everything all right? Her tone was light, but her eyes were sharp, missing little. In my past life, this woman had been my tormentor. When I had needed support the most, when my world was crumbling, she had sided unequivocally with her son. She had called me hysterical, immature, and accused me of not understanding the pressures of a military man's life. Her sympathy had been a weapon, used to gaslight me into believing I was the problem. Galina, I said, my voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth. I didn't call her mother. Not anymore. I walked past her into the sitting room, not bothering to remove my coat. The familiar surroundings, The worn rug, the framed photographs, the smell of her stew simmering on the stove, felt like a museum exhibit of a life that was no longer mine. She frowned, putting her knitting aside. Anya, what is it? You look pale. I've come to collect my things, I stated, my tone leaving no room for inquiry. She blinked, her smile faltering completely. Collect your things? What do you mean? What things? I didn't answer. I moved past her and into the bedroom I had shared with Dimitri. 3 years as a military wife hadn't left me with much of my own. My possessions were sparse. A few changes of clothes, a crate of medical textbooks and research journals, a small jewelry box that had belonged to my grandmother, and our wedding photos. I went straight to the dresser where a large silver-framed photograph held a central place. It was from our wedding day. Dimitri, looking young and impossibly handsome in his dress uniform, smiled down at me. I, in my simple white dress, gazed back up at him with a look of utter, foolish adoration. The hope in my eyes in that picture made my present self feel ill. I picked up the frame. Galina had followed me into the room. Anya, what are you doing? She asked, her voice rising with alarm. I didn't respond. I methodically pried the backing off the frame, pulled the photograph out, and without a moment's hesitation tore it in half. Then I tore it again and again, reducing our smiling faces to a pile of confetti. I let the pieces flutter into the small wastebasket by the dresser. Galina gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Have you lost your mind? Those are precious memories. Did you and Dimitri have a fight? For heaven's sake, it can't be that serious. You must be more understanding. He's under a great deal of pressure at the base. I turned to face her, my expression glacial. We didn't have a fight, Galina. I have simply finally seen the situation for what it is. What could possibly be so serious that you would destroy your own wedding photo? She demanded, her own temper beginning to flare. Your son, I said, my voice dangerously quiet, took the medicinal tonic I prepared for his chronic stomach condition and gave it to a dancer from the cultural troupe. When she had a violent public reaction to it, he carried her in his arms through the entire base to the hospital, panicked and frantic in front of everyone. He then accused me of poisoning her. Tell me, Galina, how exactly should I be more understanding of that? Her face paled, but her loyalty to her son was absolute. That's nonsense, she blustered. Dimitri would never do something like that. You're exaggerating. That girl was probably just unwell and he was being chivalrous. Wouldn't he? I snapped, my composure cracking for just a moment to reveal the steel beneath. Why don't you go ask anyone on the base? Or better yet, go ask Colonel Zaitsev's wife, Irina. She was there in the hospital. She witnessed the entire chivalrous spectacle. At the mention of Irina Zaitsev, a woman whose social power far exceeded her own, Galina's confidence visibly crumbled. In the strict hierarchical world of the military compound, the opinion of the commander's wife was law. If Irina had witnessed it, then it was true and it was a social catastrophe. Just then, the front door slammed open with such force that the pictures on the wall rattled. Heavy, frantic footsteps pounded down the hall. Dimitri stormed into the bedroom, his face a thundercloud of anger and humiliation. He must have left the hospital shortly after I did. The moment he saw me standing by the half-packed suitcase and the torn photograph in the wastebasket, he lunged forward and grabbed my wrist. His grip was painfully tight. Anya, stop this madness. Right now, he commanded, his voice rough with emotion. Let go of me, I said, my voice low and icy, my eyes locked on his. I won't, he insisted, his own eyes pleading now, the anger giving way to desperation. Please just listen to me. You have to understand. Alara, she was feeling unwell. I just felt sorry for her. It was a moment of poor judgment, that's all. I laughed, the sound bitter and hollow in the small room. You felt sorry for her? And what about me, Dimitri? Don't I deserve a shred of sympathy? Or did you forget about me entirely? I am the only daughter of the Petrova medical family. I gave up a prestigious research position at the capital's central hospital to follow you to this remote, God-forsaken base. For 3 years I've worked double shifts at the hospital without complaint. I've cooked for you, cleaned for you, washed your clothes, and spent my nights preparing specialized herbal treatments to keep you healthy. And in return you trample all over it. You hand my care, my love, my effort over to another woman. Dmitri Volkov, did a dog eat your conscience? Galina, seeing her son under attack, jumped to his defense. Anya, that's enough. Dimitri meant well. That girl's health isn't good, she's delicate. If she's so delicate, I whirled on her, my patience evaporating, then she should be in a hospital bed, not flirting with someone else's husband in rehearsal halls. Watch your mouth. Galina shrieked, shaking with rage. How can you say something so vile? I turned my back on her and focused on Dimitri, who was still gripping my arm. If you think Alara Vance is such a wonderful girl, Galina, why don't you ask your son to make her your daughter-in-law? After all, he seems to like her enough to risk his career and marriage for her. Galina was trembling, rendered speechless by my audacity. Dimitri gripped my hand even tighter, his eyes red-rimmed. Anya, I admit I messed up. I made a mistake. But I swear to you nothing happened between us. Nothing. Please, you have to believe me. Believe you. I let out a cold, mirthless laugh. Do you even believe yourself? Tell me, Dimitri, how many times have you been to the performance troops barracks this month? How long did you stay each time? When she calls you by your first name, do you ever correct her? Do you walk her back to her dorm after rehearsals? Buy her little gifts? Practice dances with her until midnight? Do I need to list every single betrayal one by one? Dimitri's face turned deathly pale. He hadn't expected me to know so much. In my previous life, I had only pieced this all together too late, when the evidence was undeniable and my fate was already sealed. Back then all I could do was cry and scream, which only made me look irrational. Now the cold, hard facts stated with clinical precision were far more damaging. Dimitri, is this true? Galina asked, her voice small and stunned, looking at her son for the first time with something other than blind devotion. Dimitri couldn't meet her eyes. He lowered his head. Mother, that's enough, he muttered, defeated. I finally yanked my wrist free from his slackened grip. We're done here. I turned back to my suitcase and zipped it shut. I looked at both of them, my mother-in-law's world shattered, my husband's facade broken. I'm leaving. And I want a divorce. The word hit the room like a physical blow. Both of them stared at me, utterly stunned. Divorce. Galina was the first to react, her voice a shrill screech. No. Absolutely not. Anya, don't be impulsive. Do you know what that will do to you? Once word gets out, your reputation will be ruined. No one will want you. I let out a genuine laugh this time, cold and sharp. My reputation? My husband is publicly philandering with a dancer, and you're worried about my reputation? How fascinating. Dimitri finally found his voice, panic setting in. Anya, don't talk about divorce. I swear to you I won't go to the troupe again. I won't see her again. I'll transfer her out myself. Just please don't do this. It's too late for promises, Dimitri, I said, picking up my suitcase. Some things, once they are broken, can never be pieced back together. The trust is gone. I walked out of the bedroom, through the sitting room and out the front door. I didn't look back. I knew the battle for public opinion was won. The war for my freedom was just beginning. As I stepped onto the path, my suitcase in hand, I almost walked right into her. Alara Vance. She was standing there as if waiting. She had changed out of her soiled rehearsal clothes and into a fresh, flattering wool dress. Her makeup was reapplied flawlessly, though it couldn't completely hide her pallor. In her hands she held a small checkered lunchbox that was still steaming slightly. She offered me a sweet, condescending smile. Dr. Petrova, she said, her voice a sickly sweet simper. I brought some lunch for Dimitri. He didn't eat at noon and I was worried his stomach might be hurting. In my past life, this precise act of calculated kindness had shattered what was left of my spirit. This time I looked her up and down with open contempt. Miss Vance, I said, my voice dripping with false concern. You recovered with remarkable speed. This morning you were vomiting and suffering from debilitating diarrhea. And by the afternoon you're already playing the doting chef. The resilience of the performing artist is truly astounding. She looked startled, then forced a weak smile. I'm feeling much better now, thank you. The 4 fluids helped. Really? I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Tell me, are you aware of the new directive that came down from District Command this morning? She blinked, confused. Directive? Oh, what are you talking about? I smiled, a thin, predatory expression. The commander's wife just held a meeting with the political department. She said there's been a noted increase in inappropriate conduct lately. Certain members of the performance troops fraternizing with married officers, damaging military discipline. Leadership has decided to make an example. Anyone found guilty will be immediately discharged from service and sent home in disgrace. Of course, their accomplices will face disciplinary hearings. I was making it all up, of course. But Alara didn't know that. Her face went ashen, all pretense of sweetness vanishing. Is that true? You can ask around if you don't believe me, I said, straightening up. But I'd be careful, Miss Vance. There are some people you should never try to touch. Military marriages are protected. Attempting to break one up isn't just a scandal. It's a career-ending and potentially criminal offense. I watched the blood drain from her face, her confidence evaporating. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked away, my suitcase feeling lighter than air. Behind me, I heard the distinct sound of a lunchbox hitting the frozen ground and shattering. I was free. The silence in my parents' apartment was a balm to my soul. It was a small, book-filled haven on the outskirts of the military district, a world away from the gossiping compound. The air smelled of old paper, my father's pipe tobacco, and the faint, clean scent of disinfectant that seemed to follow my mother, a retired nurse, everywhere. When I had walked in with my single suitcase, my father, Professor Alexei Petrova, had been reading the newspaper in his worn armchair. He'd looked up over his spectacles, his keen, intelligent eyes taking in my luggage and my determined expression. "Anya," he'd said, his voice a calm, steady rumble. "This is an unexpected visit." He put the paper down. "Is everything all right?" "Papa," I said, setting the suitcase down by the door. "I'm leaving Dimitri. I want a divorce." He didn't flinch. He didn't shout. He simply looked at me for a long, silent moment, assessing the truth in my eyes. Then he nodded slowly. "Sit down," he said. "Tell me what happened." And I did. I told him everything. The tonics, the public humiliation at the hospital, Dimitri's betrayal, Alara's manipulations, Galina's blame, and my own cold, calculated retaliation. I held nothing back. It was the most cathartic experience of my new life. When I finished, he was silent for a long time, steepling his fingers. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. "You've thought this through?" he finally asked, his voice grave. "Completely," I said, my voice firm. "Then we will proceed," he said, standing up. "Tomorrow, I will speak to an old comrade in the Judge Advocate General's office. We will have the paperwork drawn up. No one gets to treat my daughter this way." My mother, Sophia, had come out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. When she heard the tail end of our conversation, her eyes had immediately filled with tears. But they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of fury. "I knew it," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We never should have let you marry into the military. I could tell from the start that Dimitri Volkov was more in love with his own potential than he was with you. His character was weak." "Mama, don't cry," I said, going to her and letting her envelop me in a hug that smelled of flower and lavender. "This is a good thing. It's me cutting my losses while I still can." "Cutting losses?" she sniffled, pulling back to look at me. "You're already 25, Anya. What are you going to do after a divorce?" I smiled, a real, genuine smile for the first time in what felt like years. "Mama, I'm a doctor. I have 2 hands, a medical degree, and a sharp mind. My life doesn't end because a man failed to see my worth. The world keeps spinning." And that was the absolute truth. In my past life, Dimitri and Alara had pushed me so far into a corner that I had seen no way out. This time I was going to live. And I was going to live well for myself. That same night, Dimitri showed up. He stood outside the apartment building for a long time, a forlorn figure in the falling snow. My father went out to speak with him. I didn't hear what was said, but I saw Dimitri's shoulders slump further before he turned and walked away, defeated. My father returned, his expression grim. "He won't bother you again tonight." The next day, the gossip mill of the compound provided an even juicier update. Alara Vance, in a spectacular misjudgment, had gone to the Volkov house that evening to bring Dimitri dinner, no doubt to play the nurturing angel. She had been met not by a grateful Dimitri, but by a furious Galina Volkov. Humiliated by my accusations and terrified of the social ruin I had hinted at, Galina had redirected all her rage onto Alara. Witnesses reported that she had ripped into the girl right there on her doorstep, in front of all the neighbors, calling her a shameless, home-wrecking little fox, and a multitude of other less polite names. She had cursed her up one side and down the other, her voice echoing through the quiet compound. Elara, they said, had burst into tears, insisting on her innocence, claiming she was only concerned for the major's health. But Galina, her own social standing now on the line, wasn't having any of it. The confrontation only ended when Dimitri himself had to intervene and physically escort a sobbing Elara away. But even that act of chivalry backfired. Someone saw him helping her into a military jeep, and the two of them sat talking inside the vehicle for a long, intimate time before he finally left. It was the final nail in the coffin of his reputation. In a military compound where conduct was scrutinized above all else, the image of a commanding officer consoling his mistress outside his own home after his mother had publicly eviscerated her was a scandal of the highest order. The rumors spread like a prairie fire. Dmitri Volkov, the golden boy, the youngest major in the district, was now the talk of the base, and not for his accomplishments. I received a letter from my old colleague Kolya, a few days later, filled with the latest news and his own awkward apologies. I read it. The letter from Kolya was a window back into a world I was already beginning to leave behind. His handwriting was rushed, a little messy, filled with the awkward energy of someone reporting on a mutual friend's spectacular downfall. Anya, I hope this finds you well. Things here are, well, there's something. I don't even know where to start. The whole base is still talking about it. After you left, Volkov tried to act like everything was normal, but no one is buying it. He's a ghost in his own command. The junior officers look at him with pity, the senior officers with disdain. The incident with his mother and Elara Vance. God, Anya, was brutal. Mrs. Volkov screamed at her for a solid 20 minutes. Called her things I wouldn't repeat in polite company. Vance was sobbing hysterically. Then Volkov shows up, plays the hero and drives her away. They sat in that jeep for almost an hour. Everyone saw. It's all anyone can talk about. The consensus is that he's completely lost the plot. He's been summoned to the political department twice now for conversations. No one knows what was said, but he came out looking pale both times. Rumor is his promotion is frozen indefinitely. Honestly, I think it's worse than that. I think they're figuring out where to reassign him where he can do the least damage. Somewhere remote, probably. Desk job at a listening post in Siberia, that sort of thing. As for Vance, she's been officially reassigned. Not a surprise to anyone. The word is she's being sent to the 4th Border Defense Unit. That's the end of the line, Anya. Harsh conditions, no audience, just wind, sand and a bunch of homesick soldiers. She's written to Volkov, apparently. Dozens of letters. He hasn't replied to a single one. At least that's what the mail clerk says. Sorry, Anya. For everything. For being the one to tell him about the tonic, for not seeing what was happening sooner. You didn't deserve any of this. I hope you're doing better wherever you are. Kolya. I folded the letter neatly, my fingers tracing the crease. There was no satisfaction in it, no schadenfreude. Instead, I felt a strange, hollow emptiness. Reading about Dimitri's ruin was like reading an obituary for a part of my own life. The man I had loved or thought I had loved was gone, replaced by this pathetic, diminished figure. Elara's fate, too, seemed less a victory and more a predictable, sad conclusion to a tawdry story. They were both reaping what they had sown, and the harvest was bitter. I tucked the letter into a drawer. It was a relic. That life, that pain was behind me. My new life at the provincial military hospital was a study in blessed anonymity and purpose. The facility was larger, brighter, and better equipped than the one at Krasnograd. Here I was not Major Volkov's wife. I was Dr. Petrova, a talented physician with a specialty in medicinal nutrition. The difference was liberating. My colleagues were welcoming and professional. The head of my department, Dr. Karpova, was a woman in her late 50s with a no-nonsense demeanor and eyes that missed nothing. She called me into her office on my 3rd day. Dr. Petrova, she began, gesturing for me to sit. I've reviewed your file. Your work on integrating traditional herbal medicine with standard practice is impressive. We're initiating a new military wellness initiative, and your expertise is precisely what we need. It's a field I'm passionate about, I replied, feeling a spark of excitement I hadn't felt in years. Good. Passion is what drives innovation. You'll have resources here, Anya. A proper lab, funding, a team. I want you to think big. How can we use nutrition and targeted botanicals to improve readiness, reduce recovery times, boost resilience in harsh postings. It was a dream project. I threw myself into the work with a fervor that bordered on obsession. By day, I saw patients and attended rounds. By night, I buried myself in research, cross-referencing modern medical journals with my grandmother's old, handwritten recipe books. The work was a sanctuary. In the meticulous notes and controlled experiments, there was no room for the messy, painful unpredictability of human betrayal. A month after my arrival, the summons came. I was to report to Dr. Karpova's office again. When I entered, I was surprised to see another person there, a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, with a calm, intelligent presence, dressed in the uniform of a military doctor but with the insignia of the General Military Hospital in the capital. Dr. Petrova, Dr. Karpova said, a hint of a smile on her lips. This is Dr. Niko Chen. He's here on a 3-month research exchange from the General Hospital. Dr. Chen, this is Dr. Anya Petrova, our resident expert in medicinal nutrition. He stood and extended his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and confident. Dr. Petrova, it's a pleasure. I've heard excellent things about your work. His voice was a calm, steady baritone. His eyes, a warm shade of brown, held a directness that was engaging, not intimidating. Thank you, Dr. Chen. The pleasure is mine. Welcome. Niko is a specialist in internal medicine, Dr. Karpova added. While he's here, I'd like you to show him around, help him get familiar with our systems. I think your projects could have significant overlap. Of course, I said, nodding. As we left the office together, Niko fell into step beside me. I have to admit, Dr. Petrova, I requested this assignment specifically after reading your paper on adaptogenic herbs and stress resilience in high-altitude postings. I was taken aback. You've read that? It was only published in a regional journal. A friend of mine is stationed at your previous post, he said casually as we walked down the corridor. He sent it to me. Said it was written by someone with formidable principles and a sharp mind. I paused, looking at him. The mention of my past life was a slight jolt, but his expression was open and genuine, without a trace of pity or gossip. That's very kind of him to say, I replied cautiously. Niko smiled, a warm, easy expression that lit up his face. I prefer to judge for myself. And so far I'm impressed. His arrival brought a new energy to the department. Niko was highly skilled, humble, and seamlessly integrated into our team. We began discussing cases together. His insights into internal medicine were profound, and he, in turn, was genuinely fascinated by my knowledge of medicinal botanicals. Anya, he asked me one afternoon after we had finished a joint consultation, have you ever thought about systematizing this? Creating a standardized, evidence-based protocol for medicinal nutrition across the entire military medical system. I laughed softly. It's a dream. But it would take years of clinical trials, data collection. The General Hospital has the resources, he said, his expression turning serious. And you have the expertise. We could make a great team. This could do a lot of good for a lot of people. The way he said, we sent a strange flutter through my chest. It had been so long since I had been part of a we that wasn't fraught with tension and pain. And so we began. Our collaboration started professionally, a shared passion for healing. We spent long hours in the lab, running experiments, compiling data, debating the finer points of herbal synergies. Some nights we worked so late that the rest of the hospital was silent. Hungry? Niko asked on one such night, looking up from a microscope. Starving, I admitted, realizing I'd skipped dinner. Stay here, he said. He disappeared and returned 20 minutes later with 2 bowls of steaming noodles from a nearby all-night canteen. They were simple, but they were the best thing I'd tasted in ages. You're a man of many talents, Dr. Chen, I said, taking a bite. A specialist in internal medicine and a master of late-night noodles. He laughed, a rich, warm sound. When you live alone for a long time, you learn to take care of yourself. He was 32, I learned later, and still single. Not for lack of interest, he explained, but because his career and research had always come first. What about you? He asked one evening, his pen pausing over a notepad. The question was gentle, devoid of pressure. I heard, you're divorced? The directness should have felt invasive, but from him it felt like simple curiosity. My pen stilled. Yes. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked. It's all right, I said, looking up. It's in the past. And for the first time I truly felt that it was. He was quiet for a moment, his brown eyes thoughtful. Then he must be the biggest fool in the entire military, he said softly. The comment was so unexpected, so bluntly sincere that I felt a blush rise to my cheeks. I looked away, focusing on the petri dish in front of me. The past is complicated. Not always, he replied, and I could feel his gaze on me. Sometimes it's just past. Time seemed to accelerate. Nico's 3-month exchange was drawing to a close, and our research had yielded its first tangible result, a comprehensive report titled Preliminary Findings on Military Wellness Through Targeted Medicinal Nutrition. Our names were side by side on the cover, Dr. Anya Petrova and Dr. Nikolai Chin. He held the printed draft in his hands, a proud smile on his face. This is it, Anya. Just the beginning. The beginning of what? I asked, feeling a strange sense of loss at the thought of him leaving. He looked at me and his expression was deep and unreadable. The beginning of many things. The day before he was due to return to the capital, he found me in the lab. Walk with me, he asked. We walked in comfortable silence through the hospital gardens, the autumn leaves crunching under our feet. The air was crisp, smelling of wood smoke and damp earth. I have something for you, he said, stopping beside a barren rose bush. He handed me a plain white envelope. Don't open it until you're back home. The next day I accompanied him to the train station. The platform was crowded and noisy, filled with the sounds of whistles and parting goodbyes. Thank you, Anya, he said, his suitcase at his feet. For everything. For the work, for the partnership. It was my pleasure, Nico, I said, and I meant it. The hollow feeling in my chest was back. The train whistle blew, a sharp, mournful sound. He picked up his case, gave me one last long look and boarded. I stood and watched as the train pulled slowly away, his face at the window growing smaller and smaller until it vanished into the distance. The feeling of loss was acute, a physical ache. I walked back to my quiet, empty dorm room, the envelope feeling heavy in my coat pocket. Sitting on my narrow bed, I finally opened it. Inside was a photograph and a single sheet of paper. The photo was of us in the lab, taken by a colleague I hadn't even noticed. I was bent over a microscope, utterly focused. Nico was beside me, not looking at the equipment, but looking at me with a gentle, unguarded smile on his face. My breath caught. I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was neat and precise. Anya, these past 3 months have been the most intellectually stimulating of my career. But they have been more than that. Meeting you has been a revelation. Your strength, your intelligence, your kindness, they have shown me a world beyond my research. I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want to find out with you in it. Wait for me, Nico. I read the words again and again. Then I carefully pinned the photograph to the corkboard above my desk. For the first time since my rebirth, I let myself feel something other than resolve or caution. I let myself feel hope. And for the first time in a very long time, a strange, new feeling stirred inside me, warm and terrifying and wonderful. So this is what it feels like to fall for someone. The weeks after Nico's departure were strangely flat. The colors of my new life seemed muted without his presence. I buried myself deeper into our research, finding solace in the data we had collected, in the work we had started together. His letters arrived every few days. Not love letters, but updates on his work at the General Hospital, thoughts on our research, funny anecdotes about his colleagues. They were a tether to him, and I found myself waiting for the mail call with an anticipation I hadn't felt since I was a girl. I was in the middle of composing a response to his latest letter, describing a breakthrough in stabilizing a ginseng extract, when the call came. It was the front desk. Dr. Petrova, there's a gentleman here to see you. He's rather insistent. The receptionist's voice was hesitant. Did he give a name? I asked, my pen pausing over the paper. A muffled sound, then a familiar slurred voice shouted in the background. Anya. Tell her it's me. Tell her it's Dimitri. My blood ran cold. It's all right, Vera, I said, my voice tight. I'll handle it. I walked to the main lobby with a sense of grim inevitability. He was there, leaning heavily against the reception desk, reeking of cheap vodka. His uniform was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot and unfocused. The once proud major was a shambolic mess. Anya, he slurred, lurching toward me as I approached. There you are. I knew you'd see me. You're drunk, Dimitri, I said, my voice cold and flat. I took a step back, maintaining a distance. You need to leave. I came to see you, he insisted, stumbling again. Anya, I miss you. I miss you so much. This is a hospital. You're causing a disturbance. I will have security escort you out. I turned to the desk. Vera, call. No, he suddenly shouted, lurching forward and grabbing my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong, fueled by drunken desperation. Anna, please. I was wrong. I really was. Please forgive me. Let's just go home. We can start over. I tried to yank my hand back, but he held on tight. Let go of me, Dimitri. We are done. There is no home for us. So what? He cried, his voice breaking. We can remarry. Anna, I've spent the last 6 months drowning. I'm nothing without you. Just a walking corpse. The scene was drawing stares from orderlies and patients in the lobby. Humiliation warred with anger inside me. That is your problem to solve, not mine. Now let me go. Just then the main door swished open. A figure stood silhouetted against the afternoon light. It was Nico. He must have just arrived back from the capital. He took in the scene in an instant. Dimitri's grip on my arm, my tense, pale face, the crowd of onlookers. He crossed the lobby in 3 long strides. Is there a problem here? He asked, his voice calm but laced with steel. Dimitri squinted at him, his drunken brain trying to place the face. Who the hell are you? I'm Dr. Chin. A colleague of Dr. Petrova's. Nico positioned himself slightly between Dimitri and me, his posture protective without being aggressive. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to release the doctor and leave the premises. Dimitri scoffed, a ugly, drunken sound. Colleague? Does it look like just colleagues to me? What we are is none of your business, Nico replied, his voice even and firm. Security is on their way. I suggest you leave on your own accord and maintain what's left of your dignity. As if on cue, 2 security guards arrived. Nico gave a slight nod. Please escort this gentleman out. As the guards each took one of Dimitri's arms, he began to shout, struggling against them. Anna, I won't give up on you. Do you hear me? I won't. They hauled him away, his shouts fading down the corridor. The lobby fell into an awkward silence. Nico turned to me, his eyes full of concern. Are you all right? I'm fine, I said, rubbing my wrist where Dimitri had gripped it. My hand was trembling slightly. Thank you. No need to thank me, he said gently. But if anything like that happens again, you tell me immediately. Understood. The simple, fierce protectiveness in his voice was my undoing. I nodded, suddenly unable to speak around the lump in my throat. Understood. The next day Dimitri returned. Sober this time, dressed in a clean, pressed uniform, his hair neatly combed. He looked like a faded photograph of his former self. He carried a bouquet of red roses. Anya, he said, his voice earnest, though his eyes were shadowed with shame and exhaustion. I'm sorry about last night. That was unforgivable. I want us to try again. I sighed, feeling a profound weariness. Dimitri, we've had this conversation. It's over. Why won't you give me another chance? He pleaded, his emotions rising. Is it because of him? That Dr. Chin? This has nothing to do with Nico, I said firmly. Even if he didn't exist, my answer would be the same. We are adults. Adults make choices and live with the consequences. You chose ambiguity and betrayal. I chose to walk away. I'm not a saint. I won't repay betrayal with kindness. He was still unwilling to accept it. I can wait, Anya. I'll wait until you forgive me. Then wait, I said, my voice final. I turned and walked away, leaving him standing in the hallway, the roses looking absurd and pathetic in his hands. His pestering continued for a month. He brought flowers, sent long, rambling letters full of apologies and promises, waited outside the hospital gates. When that failed, he went to my parents' apartment. My father answered the door. He took one look at Dimitri and his expression turned to granite. Get lost, he said, his voice low and dangerous. My daughter wants nothing more to do with you. My mother appeared behind him, her face like ice. Dimitri, a person needs to know when they are not wanted. Think about how you treated Anya. You have a lot of nerve showing your face here. Spurned, he tried a different tactic. He tracked down Nico, finding him in the hospital cafeteria. Dr. Chin, he said, sitting down uninvited across from him. I know you have feelings for Anya. But she and I have 3 years of history. Don't you think you're the third wheel here? Nico put down his fork and looked at Dimitri with a calm that was more devastating than any anger. Mr. Volkov, a third party is someone who interferes in a relationship. You and Anya are divorced. There is no relationship to interfere in. He paused, letting the words sink in. And from what I understand, the real third party wasn't me. Dimitri's face darkened. That was all a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Nico's smile was gone. A real man owns his mistakes. You made your choices. You should take responsibility for them, not make excuses. Anya is an exceptional woman. If you didn't see that, if you didn't cherish her, then it's only natural that someone else would. Dimitri had no response. He was finally, utterly defeated. He left the cafeteria without another word. His campaign of harassment ended not because of a change of heart, but because he was abruptly assigned to a 6-month logistical survey mission on the other side of the country. It was the Siberia desk job Kolya had predicted, just a slightly more mobile version. The day before his departure, he came to see me one last time. He looked worn down, gaunt, the cocky major finally gone. Anya, he called out as I was leaving the hospital. I stopped but didn't turn around. I'm sorry, his voice was low and hoarse. I know it's too late to say anything now, but I truly regret everything. I turned to face him. What is it exactly that you regret, Dimitri? Losing me? Or losing your future? He couldn't answer. The question hung in the air between us. I heard about Alara, I said. That she was transferred. He nodded, looking at the ground. She came to see me before she was sent to the border. She said she really loved me. He gave a bitter, hollow laugh. And I realized I was only ever drawn to the idea of her. The drama of it. It wasn't real. It was a fantasy. So what? I asked, my voice soft but firm. Some mistakes can't be undone, Dimitri. You have to pay the price for them. His eyes were red-rimmed. Anya, is there really no chance for us? None at all. None, I said, my answer absolute and final. In my past life I had given him chance after chance after chance. And I had frozen to death for my trouble. I would not make that mistake again. He stood there for a long moment, a statue of regret, then nodded slowly and walked away. I watched him go, feeling the last ghost of my past life finally release its hold on me. The shadow had passed. The path ahead was clear. With Dimitri finally gone, the air itself seemed lighter. The constant, low-grade anxiety that had thrummed in the background of my new life vanished. I was free to fully embrace the present and the future that was unfolding before me. My work with Nico flourished. We finalized our second research paper, systematized medicinal nutrition protocols for Arctic deployment, and submitted it to a national military medical conference. To our astonishment and delight, it was not only accepted but selected as a keynote presentation. The conference was held in a grand old hall in Moscow. Standing at the podium, looking out at a sea of distinguished faces, I felt a surge of confidence I hadn't known was possible. This was my arena. This was where I belonged. I presented our findings, my voice clear and steady, fielding questions with ease. Nico stood by my side, a solid, reassuring presence, jumping in with detailed physiological data when needed. Afterward, the applause was thunderous. Colleagues surrounded us, offering congratulations and asking insightful questions. It was a triumph. Later that evening at a reception, Nico found me near a balcony overlooking the city lights. He handed me a glass of champagne and a single perfect white lily. Congratulations, Dr. Petrova, he said, his eyes shining with pride. You were magnificent up there. Your dream is coming true. I took the flower, its scent sweet and clean. It's our dream, Nico, I corrected gently. We did this together. His smile was soft. I like the sound of that. I do too, I whispered. The moonlight was beautiful, casting a silver glow over the city. The sounds of the reception faded into a distant hum. Nico turned to me, his expression becoming serious, yet filled with a warmth that made my heart beat faster. Anya, he began, his voice low. These past months, working with you, getting to know you, it's been the best time of my life. You are the strongest, smartest, most incredible woman I have ever met. He took a deep breath. Will you be my girlfriend? The question was so simple, so honest. I looked into his sincere, kind eyes and saw a future I had never dared to imagine. A future built on respect, partnership, and a deep, abiding affection. There was no drama, no desperate pleading, just a quiet, confident asking. Yes, I said, the word feeling like a promise. Yes, I will. His face lit up with a joy so pure it was almost boyish. He didn't kiss me, not there in front of everyone, but he gently took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. The warmth from his palm seemed to travel straight to my heart, sealing the promise. Our relationship became a quiet, steady fact. Our colleagues, who had watched our professional partnership blossom, were delighted. "We knew it," one of the nurses exclaimed. "You two just fit." When I told my parents, they immediately insisted on meeting him. They drove up the following weekend. My father, usually reserved, grilled Nico over dinner about his career goals, his family, his intentions. Nico met his gaze steadily, answering every question with honesty and respect. "Are you serious about this, son?" my father finally asked, his voice grave. "Completely, sir," Nico replied without a moment's hesitation. "I want to marry Anya. I want to build a life and a home with her." My mother, sitting beside me, squeezed my hand under the table. "He's a good man, Anya," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "A real one. Don't let him go." I blushed, nodding, my heart too full for words. 6 months passed in a blissful blur. Nico had officially transferred to the provincial hospital permanently, his exchange long over. "What's the point of a better platform if it doesn't have you on it?" he'd said simply when I'd asked him why he'd give up the prestige of the general hospital. Then Dimitri returned. He found me in the hospital garden during my lunch break. He looked different. Tanner, thinner, harder. The mission had stripped away the last of his boyishness. There was a new grimness around his eyes. "Anya," he said, "I've been awarded a second-class merit for my work on the survey. My record is clean again." There was a faint glimmer of his old pride in his eyes. "Congratulations, Dimitri," I said, my voice calm and polite. "That's quite an accomplishment." He took a deep breath as if steeling himself. "I've spent these 6 months proving myself. To the army, to myself. Can I have another chance now? With you?" I looked at him, this man who had been the center of my universe for so long, and felt nothing but a distant pity. "Dimitri," I said gently but firmly, "I have a boyfriend now." His face paled. Is it Chin?" "It is," I said. There was no malice in my tone, only finality. His shoulders slumped. "Anna, I cut him off. I wish you all the best, Dimitri. Truly I do. I hope you find someone who is right for you, and I hope you find peace." I turned to leave. Behind me I heard him call out, his voice ragged. "Anya, are you happy?" I paused, turned back, and gave him a small, genuine smile. "Yes, Dimitri. I am very happy." And I was. Nico had given me everything I had ever wanted and nothing I had ever needed to ask for. Respect, understanding, companionship, and a love that was steady and secure. A month later Nico proposed. It was on the rooftop of the hospital at sunset. He got down on one knee on the gravel-covered roof, the sky ablaze with oranges and purples behind him. "Anya Petrova," he said, pulling a simple, elegant ring from his pocket. "You have made me the happiest man alive just by being in my life. Will you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife?" Tears of joy welled in my eyes. There were no doubts, no hesitations. "Yes," I breathed. "Yes, I will." He stood and swept me into his arms, holding me tightly. "Thank you," he whispered into my hair. "Thank you for giving me this chance. I will love you all my life." We were married in a simple, warm autumn ceremony. No extravagance, just close friends and family in a small garden. My father, his eyes suspiciously bright, held my hand and placed it in Nico's. "Nikolai," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm entrusting my daughter to you." Nico held my father's gaze, his expression solemn. "You have my word, sir. I will spend my whole life loving her and making her happy." As we exchanged rings, I saw my godmother, Irina, in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She had watched me through the worst of it, and now she was here to see me find my peace. "Anya's truly found her happiness," I heard her whisper to the person next to her. Married life was a quiet, profound joy. We lived in a small, comfortable apartment. Nico, to my constant amusement, took over nearly all the housework. Your hands are meant to heal people and conduct research, he would say, taking a pot from my hands. Not wash dishes. That's my department. Our work continued to thrive. The military hospital, impressed by our conference success, established a dedicated department of medicinal wellness and appointed me as its director. Nico teased me mercilessly. Congratulations, Director Petrova, he said, handing me a bouquet on my first day. So from now on I have to call you boss? I laughed. Only at the hospital. He leaned in close, his voice a whisper. Then at home I'll call you my wife. Our days were ordinary, filled with shared coffee in the morning, discussions over research in the evening, and the simple, profound comfort of knowing I was loved for exactly who I was. The pain of my past life had finally, completely become just that, the past. In this life I was cherished. The contentment of my new life was a deep, steady current, but the past, it seemed, was not quite done with me. It arrived not with a shout, but with a quiet, persistent telephone call that shattered the peace of a lazy Sunday morning. The voice on the other end was professionally calm. Is this Dr. Petrova? Yes, speaking. This is the 3rd Military Hospital. We have a patient here, a Dimitri Volkov. He's in critical condition. He's been asking for you. He said only you can save him. The words landed like stones in the still water of my life. I froze, the receiver cold against my ear. Nico, reading the paper at the kitchen table, looked up, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. What is it? He asked, his voice gentle. I covered the mouthpiece. It's the hospital. Dimitri, he's critical. He's asking for me. Nico put down his paper and came to my side, his hand resting on my shoulder, a solid, grounding weight. Do you want to go? I was quiet for a long moment, the ghost of my past life whispering at the edges of my mind. I thought of the snow, the knocking, the cold. I thought of the man who had let me die. Then I thought of the man standing beside me now. Let's go see him, I said finally. It felt less like a choice and more like a necessary closing of a circle. The drive to the 3rd Military Hospital was silent. Nico didn't press, he just drove, his presence a quiet comfort. Dimitri was in the ICU, a pale, shrunken figure against the white sheets. Tubes and wires connected him to beeping monitors. The vibrant, arrogant major was gone, replaced by this frail shell. When he saw me, his eyes, sunken and tired, managed to focus. He tried to smile, a weak, pathetic twitch of his lips. Anya, he rasped. You came. I moved to the bedside, my doctor's instincts taking over. What happened, Dimitri? I asked, my voice professionally calm. His attending physician, a young, serious-looking man, answered for him. Long-term alcoholism led to severe myocarditis. He overexerted himself, ignored the symptoms, and it triggered catastrophic heart failure. He glanced at the chart. It's not good. I looked down at Dimitri, a complex mix of anger, pity, and frustration swirling inside me. Dimitri, I said, my voice laced with exasperation. How did you let this happen? How could you do this to yourself? He gave a weak, bitter smile. Without you, it didn't really matter how I lived. The selfishness of the statement took my breath away. Even now, at the end, it was about him. His pain. His loss. Dimitri, I said, my voice softening despite myself, you need to focus on getting better. Don't talk. He shook his head slowly on the pillow. No. I won't make it. I know I won't. His breath was a shallow, shaky rattle. I just wanted to see you, one last time. To say I'm sorry. He turned his gaze to Nico, who stood quietly by the door. Dr. Chen, please, take good care of her. She's the best woman I've ever known. She deserves the best kind of love. Nico stepped forward and, to my astonishment, took Dimitri's limp hand in his. I will, he said, his voice solemn and sincere. You have my word. A faint, almost peaceful smile touched Dimitri's lips. Then he closed his eyes. The monitor beside his bed let out a sharp, piercing, continuous alarm. The room exploded into activity. Doctors and nurses rushed in, pushing us aside. A crash cart was called for. The sounds of frantic resuscitation efforts filled the air. Nico gently guided me out of the room and into the quiet hallway. I leaned against his chest and silent tears finally streamed down my face. I wasn't crying for the man he was, but for the man he could have been. For the wasted potential. For the peace of my own youth that had, in that moment, truly and finally passed away. In the end, the efforts were futile. Dmitri Volkov was pronounced dead 20 minutes later. The funeral was a small, somber affair. Galina Volkov wept uncontrollably, aged a decade overnight by grief and regret. "It's my fault," she sobbed, clutching my hand at the graveside. "Anya, it's all my fault. If I hadn't always taken his side, if I had made him be a better man." "It's in the past, Galina," I said softly, extracting my hand. "Please take care of yourself." Many of his old comrades came, their faces etched with a mixture of sadness and pity. "What a waste," someone murmured nearby. "He had such a promising future." Nico and I stood at the edge of the crowd, paying our silent respects. We bowed our heads as they lowered the casket into the ground, and then we turned and walked away. On the drive home, Nico was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, "Do you regret it?" "Regret what?" I asked, looking out at the passing countryside. "If you had forgiven him back then. If things had been different." I turned to look at him, at his strong profile, his kind eyes. "There are no what-ifs, Nico. I don't regret anything. Everyone has to live with the consequences of their choices. He chose betrayal. I chose to walk away. And if I had to do it all again, I'd make the same choice every time." He reached over and took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For choosing me." I squeezed his hand. "No," I whispered. "Thank you for showing me what real love feels like." Dimitri's death was the final punctuation mark on that chapter of my life. It was truly, irrevocably over. Time moved forward as it always does. My work thrived. My marriage was a source of constant joy. And then one bright spring morning in 1985, a new chapter began. I was heading to work, feeling unusually tired. The world seemed to tilt slightly. Nico, ever observant, caught my arm, his face etched with immediate concern. "Anya, what's wrong? Are you feeling sick?" "I'm fine," I reassured him, though a wave of nausea passed over me. "Probably just didn't sleep well." He wouldn't hear of it. He insisted on taking me to the OB/GYN department himself, his doctor's mind already running through possibilities. When the results came back, the doctor, a cheerful woman with kind eyes, smiled. "You're pregnant," she said. "Congratulations. You're about 6 weeks along." "Pregnant?" Nico's voice was a mixture of awe and panic. His hands trembled as he took mine. "Really? Really?" The doctor nodded, laughing. "Congratulations to you both." Nico treated me as if I were made of the most delicate glass from that moment on. "Don't be so nervous," I chuckled as he hovered around me. "How can I not be nervous?" he said, completely serious. "From today on, you're not lifting a finger. You just rest and take care of our baby." The news spread, bringing a new wave of joy. My parents rushed to visit, my mother immediately taking over the kitchen. "Just tell me what you're craving, darling. I'll make it." My godmother sent nourishing supplements and strict instructions to take care of myself. I was blooming both personally and professionally. Just days before, our research project had won first prize in the military district's Scientific Advancement Awards. My colleagues teased me about my double joy. I placed a hand on my still flat belly, feeling a contentment so profound it brought tears to my eyes. In my previous life I had died at my most hopeless. But in this life I had a husband who truly loved me, a career I was passionate about, and now a child of my own growing within me. I looked out the window at the spring sunshine. "Thank you," I whispered to whoever or whatever had given me this second chance. The circle of my life had closed on pain and loss, but it had opened again, wider and more beautiful than I could have ever imagined. I was finally completely home. The end.